So I want to briefly cover Judaism and sociology. This is from My Jewish Learning. So, sociology of religion. Now, what I want to point out, I want people to cross-reference this with my previous video series, how, what's the guy's name? Franz Boas. How Franz Boas destroyed the social sciences and anthropology or something like that. Just Google me and Franz Boas and it should come up. So, sociology of religion is the study of all aspects of religion, beliefs, practices, and organizational structures. Using the tools of sociology, sociologists of religion explore the relationship between religion and society, looking at both religion's effect on society and society's effect on religion. Many of the founders of sociology of religion came to conclusions that challenge religious faith, and more particularly the traditional Jewish belief system. The first sociologists, founders of sociology of religion, Karl Marx, Emil Durkheim, and Max Weber, reacted to the economic and social upheavals of the late 19th and early 20th century, and particularly the effects of industrialization, by exploring the relationship between religion and capitalism. Their approach led them to critique the role of religion in maintaining the social order and to question the relevance of religion in an increasingly rational world. Marx most famously believed that religion could only be understood in its economic and social context. He analyzed the role of religion in upholding oppressive capitalism and argued that religion was the opium of the people. Religion enables its followers to express and cope with social inequality, thus maintaining the status quo. According to Marx, religion is a symptom of alienation that results from capitalism and would therefore disappear in a classless society. Now, what's humorous about that is a lot of the social reformers that promoted ideas similar, although not identical, to Karl Marx were U.S. progressives, most of whom were ardently Christian, particularly followers of the Quaker or Society of Friends belief system, and followers of the Seventh-day Adventist religion, and of course many Protestant sects such as the Methodists, as well as Catholics. I find it humorous because most of these people were fervently religious. Karl Marx himself tries to utilize Christ in the Communist Manifesto, and it is worth noting that Jesus Christ was very much so a communist in many ways and a socialist in many ways, with his view towards equality, equity, things of that nature, if you read the Bible. So Durkheim, a secular Jew, looked for the basic elements of religious life in all societies while asserting that the form differs depending on time and place. He argued that religion unites society and upholds social order. People perceive a force greater than themselves, society, and then represent that force through religion. Durkheim based his view of religion on his study of Australian Aborigines, in which a totem represented the clan, the social structure of the Aborigines. He argued that the relationship between the individual and the supernatural expressed the relationship between the individual and society. Unlike Durkheim, who looked for the elements to all religions, Weber looked at how each particular religion interacts with its unique social and economic context. He believed that religion shapes society, and particularly economics, rather than vice versa, as Marx believed. Religion, according to Weber, was an important reason for the divergent development of the East and West, most famously in Protestant ethic and the spirit of modern capitalism. Weber argued that Protestantism, now what's funny about that, one of the most Protestant sects is the Anabaptists, or the varying sects of Anabaptist. So if you look at, say, the Hutterites, or the other Mennonite branches, Hutterites I don't believe are Mennonite, but for example, no, they're not, they're Hutterite, what am I saying? But for example, they're Anabaptist though, the Amish, okay, you see very strictly socialist values, very strictly communistic values expressed in these communities, but yet, and these communities have predated communism, as it were. In fact, the open field planning of the Anglo-Saxon or Germanic system of shared property, known as the open field system of agriculture, was very much practiced for many centuries throughout Germanic Europe. Okay, so it's not really. It's funny how these people view these things, like they came up with these ideas. But my point is that fervently religious people, such as the Hutterites and the Mennonites and the Anabaptists in general, embraced strongly economic and socially communistic values prior to communism ever existing. He also researched Chinese and Indian religions, this is Max Weber, as well as ancient Judaism. Weber saw ancient Judaism as the source of Christianity, which in turn shaped the Western world. According to Weber, the prophets in the Hebrew Bible taught that people should live their lives according to divinely mandated moral rational law, and this emphasis shaped Western consciousness. Weber also discussed, I would argue the reverse. I would argue that Western consciousness shaped Western religion. Weber also discussed secularization, the possibility that religion someday may no longer play a role in society as it does today. Marx, Durkheim, and Weber Weber argued that religion can be explained in social terms. We do not need to look to the supernatural as the source of religion's power. By reducing religion to its fictional function, they opened up the possibility that religion is replaceable and may one day become obsolete. Marx and Durkheim also raised questions for anyone who believes in a particular religion by pointing out the common elements in all religion. Weber, by focusing on the unique aspect of each religion, did not pose as much of a threat to traditional religions or religious faith in this respect. New directions. Today, sociology of religion has developed in new directions that pose new questions for the Jewish tradition, as more and more people embrace fundamentalisms of various kinds, and religion plays an increasingly apparent role in world politics. Sociologists no longer predict secularization. Instead, they strive to understand the role of religion in a world of increasing globalization. For Peter Berger, a reality is socially constructed. And so this is what's funny. So for this dude, Peter Berger, these are the concepts that destroy science. So reality is, quote, socially constructed. Think about that. This approach to religion, so how would stating that reality is socially constructed affect the opinions of people that embrace this kind of liberalism that would be prescribing medications? This approach to religion, like that of Marx, Durkheim, and Weber, contradicts traditional understandings of religious truth and would be problematic for all forms or all orthodox forms of religion, including Judaism. Berger, Berger, one of the most prominent sociologists of religion, also explores how religious individuals and organizations and organizational structures respond to a world where religion is no longer a given, and people choose between numerous religious and secular options. Similarly, sociologists who focus on American Jewry explore how American Jewish communities respond to the challenge of maintaining a religious identity in the United States today, where Jews can choose between many options, both within and outside the Jewish world. While some communities choose to isolate themselves, others choose to accommodate the secular world. Samuel Heilman, a leading sociologist of American Jewish life, discusses how the ultra-Orthodox and modern Orthodox American Jewish communities provide different models of approaching the modern secular world. The Orthodox, more isolationist; the modern Orthodox, more accommodating. Lynn Davidman also explores the differences between these communities, focusing on women's roles in these communities, and particularly secular women who choose to join these communities. In a world where so many options are available to them, she asks, why do secular women choose to enter the often male-dominated world of Orthodox Judaism? Sociologists who look at conservative Judaism similarly explore why individuals choose conservative Judaism among the many questions available to them. In the recent volume, Jews in the Center, Conservative Synagogues and Their Members, edited by Jack Wertheimer, sociologists look at why the largest number of synagogue-affiliated American Jews join conservative synagogues, meaning very liberal synagogues. They're very open, accommodating. How does conservative Judaism negotiate the balance between maintaining tradition and accommodating the secular world? Well, in Israel, while the sociology of American Jewry continues to develop, sociology of Israeli Jewry is much more limited. Sociologists of religion in Israel tend to be either foreign-born or Orthodox, and they often do not make use of concepts and frameworks from the wider field of sociology of religion. Ezra Koplowitz and Yale Israel, who two Israeli sociologists, explain that sociology of religion mostly looks at religion as part of the private sphere, inquiring into the ways individuals make religious choices in their everyday lives. The concepts of sociology of religion, they argue, are less helpful in Israel, where religion is so tied up in the public sphere. So what you have to understand about Israel is a theocratic state. You must understand that. So the religious ideology and the social ideology are one. Hence the concept of Zionism. Or the ethnic nationalism embraced by Israel. Sociology of religion in Israel needs to develop new concepts and frameworks to address the unique challenges facing the Jewish religion and the Jewish state. This was done by that dude that created the religious concept of cosmodeism. Now, I would strongly encourage people to cross-reference this video and the video prior to this with the work by Dr. Kevin MacDonald. That work by Dr. Kevin MacDonald is, of course, the culture of critique. He is an evolutionary psychologist. As sociology of religion continues to develop, it can provide helpful insights into the different options Jews face today. Sociology of religion can help Jews explore the implications of increasing isolation or increasing openness to the secular world. Now, what I want to point out is there are essentially, allegedly, I don't know how true this is, but according to people that know better than I do, there are 8 genders in the Talmud. Now, I have never heard of this in my life, but I'm not a Talmudic scholar. So, thought non-binary gender was a modern concept? Think again. The ancient Jewish understanding of gender was far more nuanced than many assume. The Talmud, a huge and authoritative compendium of Jewish legal traditions, contains, in fact, no less than 8 gender designations. So they are Zakar, male, Nekava, female, Androgynous, having both male and female characteristics, Tumtum, lacking sexual characteristics, Ayalonit, Hamach, identified female at birth, but later naturally developing male characteristics, Ayalonit Adam, identified female at birth, but later developing male characteristics through human intervention, Saris Chama, identified male at birth, but later naturally developing female characteristics. So what you have to understand is this. So, say somebody was on a certain psychiatric medication that made them androgynous, or androgynous, okay, which I believe is Greek for androgynous. That would make, so if somebody was gynecomastic because of the intervention of a doctor, that could be a problem, but not under the 8-gendered law here, because they would simply be androgynous. Saris Adam, identified male at birth and later developing female characteristics through human intervention. So the Talmud identifies 8 genders: Zakar, male, Nekava, female, androgynous or androgynous, having both male and female characteristics, Tumtum, lacking sexual characteristics, Ayalonit Chama, identified female at birth, but later naturally developing male characteristics, Ayalonit Adam, identified female at birth, but later developing male characteristics through human intervention, Saris Chama, identified male at birth, but later developing female characteristics, and Saris Adam, identified male at birth and later developing female characteristics. So, in fact, not only did the rabbis recognize 6 genders that were neither male nor female, they had that's not true. They do recommend, because they're saying, never mind. Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar also said Adam was first created with 2 faces, one male and the other female. As it is stated, "You have formed me behind and before, and laid your hand upon me." Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar imagines that the first human was created both male and female with 2 faces. Later, this original human being was separated and became 2 distinct people, Adam and Eve. According to this Midrash, then, the first human being was, to use contemporary parlance, non-binary. Offers a slightly different version of Rabbi Yirmiyah's teachings. Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar, in the hour when the Holy One created the first human, he created him as an androgynous, one having both male and female sexual characteristics, and it is said male and female he created them. Now, what you must understand here, now, as somebody that is, I would actually consider myself an alchemist, although I haven't practiced laboratory alchemy in a very long time. This is similar to many concepts of alchemy and in the discovery of the Philosopher's Stone. But these are allegories in alchemy. So, said Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmane, Shmuel bar Nachmane, in the hour when the Holy One created the first human, he created him a double face and sold him and made him backs, a back here and a back there, as it is said, behind and before you formed me. In the version of the teaching of Rabbi Ramea, it is not focusing on the first human's face, or rather faces, but on their sexual organs. They have both the Midrash imagines this original human looked something like a man and a woman conjoined at the back, so that one side has a woman's face and a woman's sex organs, and the other side has a man's face and sex organs. Then God split. Now what's funny, people get so hot and bothered by the Baphomet, or the Sabbatic goat. Now the Sabbatic goat is honestly a depiction of God having all the characteristics. It sits on the earth, okay? It has the words dissolve and coagulate, or dissolve and solidify, and on its arms, meaning to dissolve and coagulate, which is an alchemical process. It has human tits, and it has a penis, okay? So, the thing is, and it has the head of the goat, showing the primal side of human nature, and it has a torch symbolizing the fire and light of enlightenment. It is not the devil, okay? But people get all hot and bothered by the Baphomet. Imagine if churches and synagogues started showing people with their backs sewn together, and chick on one side, dude on the other. Do you think people would be cool with that? For the rabbis, the androgynos wasn't a thing of the mythic past. So they're saying that the androgynos wasn't allegorical and wasn't mythological. Okay, it was real is what they're saying. Okay, the term appears no less than 32 times in the Mishnah and 283 times in the Talmud. Most of these citations are not variations on this myth, but rather discussions that consider how Jewish law, or halakha, applies to one who has both male and female characteristics. That the androgynos is from a halakhic perspective, neither male nor female, is confirmed by Mishnah Bikurim, which states this explicitly. The androgynos is in some ways like men, and in other ways like women. In other ways, he is like men and women. In other ways, he is like neither man nor woman. That is from the Mishnah Bikurim, because Hebrew has no gender-neutral pronoun. Actually, it does, androgynos. The Mishnah, the language of Hebrew. The Mishnah uses a male pronoun for the androgynos, though this is obviously insufficient given the rabbi descriptions of the person. Reading on, we find that the androgynos is for the rabbis in many ways like a dude. They dress like a dude. They are obligated in all the commandments like a dude. They marry women, and their white emissions lead to impurity. However, in other ways, the androgynos is like a chick. They do not share in inheritance like sons. They do not eat of sacrifices that are reserved only for men, and their red discharge leads to impurity. The Mishnah goes on to list ways in which an androgynos is just like any other person, like any human being. One who strikes him or curses him is liable, meaning they have rights. Similarly, one who murders an androgynos is, well, a murderer. But the androgynos is also unlike a man or a woman in other important legal respects. For instance, such a person is not liable to enter the temple in a state of impurity, as both man and woman would be, as both men and women would be. As should now be clear, the rabbinic interest in this gender ambiguous categories is largely legalistic, since the halakha was structured for a world in which most people were either male or female. Applying the law to individuals who didn't fall neatly into one of those two categories was challenging, as Rabbi Yossi remarks in this same chapter of the Mishnah. The androgynos is a unique creature, and the sages could not decide about him. In many cases, the androgynos is lumped together with other kinds of non-binary persons, as well as other marginalized populations, including women, slaves, the disabled, and minors. For example, concerning participation in the three pilgrimage festivals, Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, during which the Jews of antiquity would travel to the temple in Jerusalem, the Mishnah of Chagiga opens, all are obligated on the three pilgrimage festivals to appear blah blah blah, except for a deaf mute, an imbecile, and a minor, and a tum-tum, an androgynous woman or women and slaves who are not emancipated, and the lame, the blind, the sick, and the old, and one who is unable to ascend to Jerusalem on his own legs. So some of this is due to impurity, to not cause impurity, and others of it is done to show that these people have no obligation due to their handicaps. As this Mishnah indicates, it is only a healthy, free adult man who are men who are obligated to appear at the temple to observe the pilgrimage festivals. People who are not adult men and men who are enslaved or too old or unwell to make the journey are exempt, as well as we all have already stated. So that's actually all due to impurity, because they believe the sick are impure, of course. As we have already stated, the androgynos was not the only person of ambiguous gender identified by the rabbis. Similarly, the rabbis recognize one whose sexual characteristics are lacking or difficult to determine, called a tum-tum. In the Mishnah from Bikurim, this person cited Rabbi Yossi, who said the androgynos was legally challenging for the sages, said the tum-tum was much easier to figure out. The rabbis also recognize that some people's sexual characteristics can change with puberty, either naturally or through intervention, less common than the androgynos and the tum-tum, but still found throughout rabbinic texts are the Ilonit, who is born with organs identified as female at birth but develops male characteristics at puberty or no sex characteristics at all, and the Saris, who is born with male identified organs and later develops features reorganized as female or no sex characteristics at all. These changes can happen naturally over time or with human intervention. Okay, so for the rabbis, what is most significant about the Ilonit and the Saracens is that they are presumed infertile. The later is sometimes translated as a eunuch. Their inability to have offspring creates legal complications the rabbis address. For example, a woman who is 20 years old who did not grow 2 pubic hairs should bring proof that she is 20 years old, and from that point forward, she assumes the status of an Ilonit. If she marries and her husband dies childless, she neither performs the Halitza nor does she enter into levirate marriage. A woman who reaches the age of 20 without visible signs of puberty, in particular pubic hair, is deemed an Ilonit who is infertile. According to the Mishnah, she may still marry, but it is not expected that she will bear children. Therefore, if her husband dies and the couple is in fact childless, his brother is not obligated to marry her, as would normally be required by the law of levirate marriage. A non-binary woman, or a non-binary person, who does not have the same halakhic status as a male or female, but is something else that is best described as ambiguous or in between, presented a halakhic challenge, that meaning a Jewish law challenge, that was not particularly foreign for the rabbis, who discuss analogs in the human and plant kingdoms. For example, the rabbinic text describe a koi as an animal that is somewhere between wild and domesticated, and an etrog, yes, that beautiful citron that is essential for sukkot, as between a fruit and a vegetable. Because they don't fit neatly into common categories, the koi and the etrog require special halakhic consideration. The rabbinic understanding of the world was that most categories, be they animal, vegetable, or mineral, are imperfect descriptions of the world, either as it is or as it should be. Okay, in recent decades, queer Jews and allies have sought to reinterpret these 8 genders of the Talmud as a way of reclaiming a positive space for non-binary Jews in the tradition. The starting point is that while it is true that the Talmud understands gender to largely operate as a binary thing on a binary axis, the rabbis clearly understand that not everyone fits these categories. So imagine how somebody that accepts the fact that accepts the belief that there are 8 genders, imagine how that might flavor their attitudes towards things like gender dysphoria or transgenderism or things of that nature. Okay, consider that. Moving forward. So this is from Juniverse, the 8 genders of the Talmud. Okay, and you can read this on your own. I'm not going to go over the same stuff. So this is what the Torah teaches us about gender fluidity and transgender justice. And you can read this on your own. I'm not going to go over a similar thing. The Torah and the Talmud are, of course, different. The Torah is allegedly the law of the prophets, whereas the Talmud is, of course, the law of the teachers, the rabbis. Moving forward. So, as noted, the prevailing morality of the Western world is based in Christian concepts, so gender and sexuality in Christianity. Sexuality refers to God's anthropological design and pattern for the procreative relationship between male and female, and to the experience of erotic desire within that design. Gender refers to biological differences in the male and female embodiment and the different cultural ways in which the creational distinctions between male and female are manifested. So what I want you to understand here, so this is Christianity, which is more or less the cornerstone of our cultural values in the West, but it's not so much Christianity, it's not so much based on Christianity as it is in the Socratic and Platonic and different Greek and Roman philosophical manifestations that have influenced the Christian thought. So let's see here. So the summary. Sexuality refers to God's anthropological design and pattern for the procreative relationship between male and female, and to the experience of erotic desire within that design. Gender refers to biological differences in the male and female embodiment. Genesis 1:2 provides that a Christian with the foundational truths behind these distinctions. God created humanity, male and female, in his image for one another. God created humanity, male and female, in his image. So what you need to understand is it is not Adam that was made hermaphroditic. It was God himself, or itself, that was hermaphroditic. You have to remember, God is what? God is everything, right? Okay, and that's why I strongly encourage people that are true believers in God to look into pantheism, cosmotheism, Brahmanism, things of that nature, New England transcendentalism, and the equation of God with the natural world and with the universe. And I think you're going to find it makes a lot more sense than does, say, Christianity, Judaism, etc. So God created humanity, male and female, in his image, meaning in its image, for one another. So male and female are created for each other. To deny any part of this teaching is to subject God's purposeful design to the desires of humanity. While much of modern culture desires to deny these distinctions and untether gender from sexuality, the New Testament reaffirms the Old Testament's teaching on this topic. Okay? So, a Christian framework for gender and sexuality begins with understanding that each find their origin, structure, and purpose within God's will for creation. Gender and sexuality, from a Christian perspective, are enchanted realities, imbued with divine meaning and purpose. But as the drama of Scripture unfolds, gender and sexuality become impacted by sin. Yet in the light of redemption, the original design and purpose of gender and sexuality are reaffirmed and heightened as the New Testament explains their ultimate telos to reflect the Christ Church union. Okay, so the assumption that gender and sexuality are ordered by God and for God stands in stark contrast to modernity's view that divinizes gender and sexuality, understanding both to be ordered to and determined by consent and human will alone. Sexuality and gender in God's design. When speaking of sexuality and gender, what is meant by these terms? Sexuality can have a broad and narrow meanings, both simultaneously sometimes. And the broad rendering, sexuality refers to God's anthropological design and pattern for procreative relationship. Gender, the biological differences between the two. Okay, and I'm going to move on here. So as I stated, what has shaped our outlook in the West regarding So what has shaped our outlook in the West regarding things like sexual morality and morality in general is actually our concepts that go all the way back to the Neolithic era and all the way back to the classic Greek and classic Roman era and all the way back to the medieval era. So Western ideals of gender equality, now this is strikingly dissimilar from the contemporary Middle Eastern view, which is based in Judaism and those things, okay? Now, the Middle East was not like this always. The Middle East used to be pagan like the West was. Christianity is very similar to paganism, but moving beyond religion, that's when you have the concepts of Western philosophy, the Socratic and Platonic and baloney like that, which actually asserts nature's natural order. So it's the natural order that, so what I'm trying to say here is, in the Middle East, you have essentially a false god created by a people to assert the primacy of humanity, and more importantly, of a specific group of humanity. Not humanity in general, but of the Israelites. And then later, the Islamic folks. So what you have going on here is you have a false god created by a people to exalt them above all other people, giving them rights over all other people. And on top of that, you then have this concept of humanity can change natural order, and that's cool. You know what I mean? You don't have to obey natural law. Whereas the Western concepts are starkly and firmly based in natural philosophy, in natural order, in Socrates, in Plato, in these things. So you should learn about these things, and that's where Christianity gets a lot of the concepts of natural order and upholding natural order. It's not from the Bible, it's not from the Old Testament or the New Testament, it's from the ancient Greek and Roman times, which is predated by the Neolithic era. You will find very similar things that I will go over later in Hinduism and in Oriental concepts from China, like Taoism. But most importantly, what you have to understand is the Indo-Aryan concepts of gender are in sync with Western civilization's concepts of gender. Now, I think there's plenty of room for all of this in a modern society, and I think that it helps to balance society to a large extent. So I don't think that we need to get rid of the Middle Eastern concepts. I think we should keep them, but I personally adhere more to the naturalistic worldview, which is, like the classic Greeks, the classic Romans, the Hindus, the Taoists, these things. It's more in sync with the contrasting and complementary. So the concepts in Western society is that things are contrasting and complementary and equally important. So, and that's why we have a Western striving for gender equality, whereas in the Middle East, they like to have a stark separation of rights, men ruling over women. Okay, so this essay will illustrate the Western ideals are highly relevant and to an understanding of the roles played by women in contemporary Middle East societies, and will highlight the need for cultural sensitivity as well as universal commitment when using such Western notions of gender equality. The 1979 Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women will be used to frame this debate. Orientalism will highlight the colonial legacies that are still present in post-colonial thinking. Egypt, the Palestinian population, monarchical states such as Saudi Arabia, the theocracy of Iran, and the secular, it's not secular, yet Jewish state of Israel will be considered with their specificities. Okay, patriarchy and Arab tribalism, religion, politics, economics, and culture and society. Any distinction, exclusion, or restriction may... Okay, so let's see where this is. So, due to the word limits on this essay, discussion will only briefly consider the impact of economic constraints on women's roles in society in the Middle East. So any distinction, conclusion, or restriction made on the basis of sex which has the effect or purpose of impairing or nullifying the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise by women, irrespective of their marital status, on the basis of equality of men and women, of human rights and fundamental freedoms, on the political, economic, social, and cultural or civil or any other fields. This is essential to analyzing equality to the counter women's human rights. Now, what's very interesting and humorous about this is everybody assumes that Western civilization has been subjugating women. I did another video about this. Everybody wants to think that white Western men have a jackboot on the neck of every woman. That's not the case. The white Western male population are the reasons we have things like women's rights, because they were essential to our Enlightenment values and even go further back. Nevertheless, whereas the Middle Eastern concepts based in Judaism and Islam are very much against the equality of women. Nevertheless, roles played by women in contemporary Middle Eastern states vary between states, specific peoples, and communities. Malkia Mahidid agreeing refers to the blah 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 Oriental women. Such an ethnocentric, pictorial, erotic discourse conjures up the image of a negative Eastern femininity, systematically yada yada yada. Western notions of gender equality are relevant to the Middle East in order for the West to be held accountable since the colonial period. However, feminists, both Western and Middle Eastern, face great difficulties when working to improve women's lives in certain Middle Eastern countries. So what I would argue with this is, under Western colonialism, for example, India was atrocious the way they treated women. Yes, I know I stated that Indo-Aryan measures, particularly those of things like Tantra and Shaktism and things like that, embrace gender equality in many ways, particularly in a religious sense. Culturally, it was awful. You had women that were burnt alive when their husbands died. That was stopped by the British. Okay? A lot of these anti-woman things were stopped by colonial forces like the British, the French, etc. So when people say that the West needs to be held accountable for colonialism, they need to understand, no. These barbaric, and to be honest, I don't care. I don't think it's any of our business in the West, but these barbaric, backward civilizations need to be looked at in the context of what they are actually doing in space and time. Instead of blaming everything on the colonial powers, it doesn't make any sense. So cultural relativism holds the potential to inhibit progress towards equality if every time a human rights law pertaining to women is constrained by a culture. And that's the thing. Every time, it's our culture, it's our culture, it's our culture. Okay, well, that's well and good. Keep your culture in your country. That shouldn't apply when they come to our country. Moving forward. So this is from JUFAC. This is about the role of women in Judaism. In Judaism, God is neither male nor female. The Talmud says both good and bad things about women. Women are not required to perform certain commandments. Certain commandments are reserved specifically for women. The first of the month is a mirror festival for women. Men and women sit separately in traditional synagogues. The idea of Lilith as a feminist hero is based on questionable sources. And this goes back into the Halakha, and you can read this on your own. I don't feel like rehashing. So when we come back, we're going to talk about medical yoga therapy, the chakras, or actually it's pronounced chakra system, and the endocrine system, and the three treasures of traditional Chinese medicine and Taoism. And that's all for this video.